Hello, I'm Mike Hackard. I'm the chair of Hackard Law, a law firm focusing on estate, trust, and elder financial abuse litigation in California's major urban areas. This is Hackard Law's podcast. It starts here. This is an August 2017 podcast featuring Chaplain Mindi Russell, the Executive Director of the Law Enforcement Chaplaincy of Sacramento. We're going to discuss how Chaplain Mindi has made a difference in people's lives both here in Northern California and in the country. I appreciate Mindy's presence here today. And Mindy, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So it is a delight, as I've said before, and Mindy's heard this, to get to know her and get to know the great work that she's done, both here as well as I know around the country. Some of the listeners are going to know, maybe many of them are going to know about you, but I want them to hear more. So let's start. Where were you born?
Well, a lot of people don't know. I was born in Annapolis, Maryland. And so I had my children there. I got married there. I went to school there. And then when I came out here to visit my dad for just a brief time, we fell in love with Sacramento, California. So my husband, my family, and my sister, her family, and my mom all came out to Sacramento.
So I hear you sing the praises of Sacramento, but I've heard that you've sung elsewhere. What did you do?
Well, this is so funny because I was a singing gospel evangelist on the East Coast, up and down the East Coast. And that's really actually why we came out to Sacramento, so that I could sing at my dad's church. I just thought that, wow, coming out on the West Coast, I would be really in demand, but I stopped singing for 5 years.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, what did you do during those 5 years?
My husband and I were really entrepreneurs, so we did a couple other things different than what God called us to do. And that was we actually started some cafes. One was called What's Cookin', and the other one was Lunch Connection. And we actually went around and took food to offices, corporations, during the lunch hour.
Wow, that's great. After you did that, tell me, what did you do?
Well, the thing that had always been a passion for me is to help people. And when we were first married, we were in Germany. And my husband was in the service, and I worked for American Red Cross on the Munich Olympics.
Wow.
1972. And for that one day that they shut down the Munich Olympics, I was gifted and charged with 2 athletes that I got to take care of and to really help calm their nerves because they were American and they were Jewish. And that was what the massacre was all about.
That's interesting. My recollection, because I do remember that was 72.
Yes.
And so who were those 2 athletes? Was one Mark Spitz?
Oh, I wish it was Mark Spitz, but it wasn't. It was just 2 athletes that, honestly, all these years later, I don't even remember. I think one was named Patty, and there was a young boy named, I think, David.
Being there, and I've been to the site of that. I wasn't there in 72, but did you know what was going on? Was it clear what was going on?
Yes, because we lived on the base where all the athletes, all the Americans were brought to protect them, because really this has never happened before. So they really didn't know what to do. So they took care of the athletes just to kind of everybody settling down. And then the other part of it was that the bad guys were put in the prison on base too. So you can see the apprehension. And my job was to do exactly what I do today, is take care of people when they're in chaos and keep them calm while they're trying to process this tragedy.
Did it work?
It did work, but we got better.
You got better with time.
Yes.
Yeah, they say that you can get better with experience.
Well, nobody, up until ground zero, nobody had classes about how to help people in trauma, or not the right ones. There wasn't really a lot of training in crisis, and even our first responders were not treated really well when they were exposed to trauma. So I was always searching to find how we can help people better in their worst times.
Okay. Since you mentioned ground zero, so 9/11, you're probably watching a TV somewhere, Okay, tell me what happens.
Well, I was here in Sacramento. I was in charge of being the month of September to respond to any kind of national disaster. And so, all up until that time, I had trained for, quote, the big one. Well, this was the big one. And just like everybody else, we were all in shock. I got the first phone call at 6 in the morning from Washington, D.C. to say, get on a plane and get out to New York. And actually, they were flipping a coin for all the responders to decide where they're going to go, to New York or Pentagon. And then the second plane hit, and that's when they called me back and said, you were allowed 4 hours to respond to any call, but my go bad's packed, right? And they said, go to the airport right now. We'll give you further instructions there. But during that time, President Bush shut down all air flight. And so I called back Washington, D.C. to say, how do I get out there? The planes are down on the ground. And they said, we don't care, just get out here. So then it had to be for me to try to find a way to get out to New York City. And I got a call from Travis Air Force Base and said, we've got a seat for you if you want to fly to New York. So I get down to Travis Air Force Base, and I was with this SART team, and there was 32 officers, soldiers, and people ready to go to New York City. And we were the only airplane in the sky with fighters on either side.
Wow. Now, tell us what the SART team is, and I'm going to also stop for a second. I want to quit saying wow, by the way. Some of this stuff is wow, and I'm going to quit saying it. We'll try at least. So what is the SART team?
Okay, that's a search and rescue team. And that was really trained from the group that went to Oklahoma City. So even though I worked at Oklahoma City for the people that came back from Oklahoma City, I knew all the guys that were going out. So this was a really good fit for me to go and get on that plane and get out to.
So you're on the military aircraft. You land. Where do you land at JFK or where?
Actually, we landed in New Jersey. And we were there for 6 hours, where New York City was saying, we don't need anybody's help. So everybody was kind of at a stand down, and I proceeded to call Washington, D.C. again, and they said, rent a car and get out here. You are not held with the same things that the SART team is, the regulations. So get out here. So we rented a car, and honestly, I had never been to New York City before, but we just followed the big smoke in the sky and never had to ask for directions. And we were the only vehicle on the Brooklyn Bridge. We were the only car in New York City driving around giving permission from the National Guard and police officers to get on scene.
And how did any people along that road know that you had permission?
Because we had 7 IDs around our necks. Certification for any type of major disaster is absolutely essential. So I had one from Washington, D.C., American Red Cross, for ICISF, which is the International Critical Illness Stress Foundation, a trauma association. So I had all these regular IDs that got us to the next step.
That's impressive. And so as you approached the buildings, or what were the buildings, you must have been stopped, and where did you go from there?
So our instructions were to get to this one location, and then we were going to be given more instructions. And that's what really happens in disasters. We're organizing chaos, and a lot of times, even though we've trained, when the situation happens, you've got to be very fluid because things change. They changed the Family Assistance Center 3 different times because it was overflowing with people. And that's where we ended up at Pier 62. But so we go to this one location, and we're instructed just to go to Ground Zero and see how we can help. So Ground Zero is right where the Twin Towers imploded. But there were hundreds of buildings that were demolished or broken windows. It took us 8 days just to get to the warm zone, not the hot zone, but the warm zone where we think people were shut down in their own apartments and couldn't get out. So once we got there, we get to ground zero. It was the first day. It was a beautiful day, but everything was gray because when people were walking, it was a lot of the ash. And so when we would get there, we would just walk up to people or they would walk up to us. And everybody was so gracious and so thankful that we had flown 3,000 miles to come to New York City to help them any way we could.
And you must have had a uniform on that they could identify.
Oh, chaplain.
Yeah, chaplain.
It just says chaplain. And even though we didn't wear a regular uniform, the word chaplain had people drawn to us all the time because there was no political correctness at this point. People needed some security, some stability, and some spirituality. They needed to know they were going to be all right. From the officers that I walked the beat with at nighttime, to the first responders out on the scenes, to the families looking for their family members, they were all so needing something solid, an anchor.
So many people being grief-stricken, and you being around them and trying to assist them, that must have been overwhelming for you as well.
So when I first got there and I saw how big it was, I know I said a prayer, something so simple like, God, just empty me of me and fill me with you because I don't know what to do. And I didn't. It was overwhelming. There were 5,000 people in the Family Assistance Center that I was in charge of, and to qualify people to help them, and officers that were hearing story after story that were literally go behind the curtain and just sob. It was overwhelming is a great word. But I remember at one point I just felt so good to know I only need to help one person at a time. And that's what I ended up doing. Just when I was assigned one person, that person I stayed with until I went to the next person. And what I mean by that is, as I was helping that person, we're finding what their needs were to get them the next resource. So I was kind of first hands-on to get them to where they needed to go. So the overwhelming stopped and the autopilot jumped in, and I did what I had been trained for all my life. And I knew I was helping people one person at a time.
Yeah, terrific. So after that, you ever have a meltdown?
Well, I must admit, I still won't watch the shows every year. Several of my partners have died, and I still hear from some of the officers and some of the families that when I came back from California, I looked them up because of the airplane crash. I was in charge of going to do a retreat for American and United Airlines because they were really our first heroes. And so I got to meet them, and I've stayed in touch with several of them over the years. And we're talking 16 years now, and it's just as fresh. I've gone back to New York City 5 times, and I've put on anniversary ceremonies here in Sacramento where the governor gets involved. So, but meltdown completely, not really, but there's a definitely grief wave that hits my heart about the end of August until September 11th passes.
And I know that from all of that, it even impacted your health. So you have described it a little bit, but describe what you and others that were close to Ground Zero, what you faced.
So there's a scripture that goes, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." That came alive that day. As we were walking, it became such sacred ground because we were walking on ash, and we knew that that was the buildings And those were the people inside those buildings, our first responders and the families. So it became very surreal. And for all of us going there, we went to help, and we really didn't have the right kind of air masks, hard hats, gloves, the things that we should have had. So many of us have encountered respiratory problems because of it. But I had somebody ask me a couple years ago, because I have COPD and I've never smoked a day in my life. But the doctor said, you breathe in all those toxics, the gases, the fumes and all. Somebody said, well, was it worth it because your health is so bad? And I said, I would do it again in a heartbeat. And that's why I continue to do what I do, because I really believe that, you know what, I'm in a right place. I shared with you once that Mark Twain said, there's two significant events in everybody's life: the day you were born and the day you know why you were born. I know why I was born. I know that ground zero was just one of my milestones. But when I come back and I hear that I've been able to help a family or a person, that's their ground zero, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that that's what I'm supposed to do.
Well, you can cover so much ground. She really should write a book. I mean, if she doesn't write a book, she's harming all of us. But so let's get back to today. So it's 2017, and like you said, a lot of people have their own ground zero, and you help in that. But describe for me. So take us through one of your work weeks and who you are, who you manage, what kind of things go on. So could we do that?
Okay, so the Law Enforcement Chaplaincy is made up of about 150 volunteers. There's only 2 career chaplains, and we oversee this program that oversees the whole county of Sacramento. We work with the city, the county, the state, and the federal law enforcement agencies. And we respond to law enforcement families, professional and personal crisis, and community members and school districts when they have a crisis. We're trained in trauma. So although my name is Chaplain Mindi Russell, that chaplain means nothing more than the confidentiality that a chaplain can have with a person. And I think that's a lot of credibility that comes with that term. But our training in trauma makes us professionals in the area of trauma response and care. And when we go out, we're called to everything you read about and things you don't read about, from suicides, homicides, baby deaths, fatal accidents, all these things that are such extremes that most people don't really want to hear about. That's what we are in the midst of every day.
And I want you to take us through that a little bit. You're not, without violating confidence, because you have, just like with me in the field that I do, I've seen so many things that I can describe them generically. But describe for us generically there's been a fatal accident. Who calls you and what do you do?
Okay. So what happens is our law enforcement immediately gets on the phone and calls us. So I kind of joke with them and say, when people are in need, they call 911, they get an officer. But when officers call 911, they get the chaplain. And when we arrive, ideally, what ends up happening is we have 2 types of chaplains: those chaplains that are trained to work with officers, and those chaplains that are trained to work with the community. So it's a great marriage of 2 different missions under one banner. So we send out the chaplains to make sure the officers are okay while they're doing their job. But they pretty much always can handle it, unless they are the victim themselves. If the fatal accident happens to have their family member in it, then they're no different than any other victim. But then our community chaplains arrive, and they're there to help the families. They go to the hospitals. They'll go to the families' homes. They will sit with the families to be able to provide information as the family is able to process. So the care that we give them on scene really points to the hope that God will give them later. But they're in that shock and the surreal of this situation. And every victim has said this. I never thought this would happen to me. So we've got to get them beyond that shock that it did indeed happen to you, but you're going to be able to live through it, grow through it, and be better after it. If you will help, let us help you.
And I know that there are times that you've said it's just you just need to be there. It's just the power of presence. Maybe even if nothing is said.
Right.
But describe that a little bit.
So we used to use the terminology, the ministry of presence, which is nothing more than let us be there. And I've heard officers say this over and over again. When we see you show up, you chaplains, our stress level drops. And I pursued that once and said, why is that? And the fact is, they've got a job to do, and they don't have a lot of time to work with the emotions of the victims. They got a crime to solve, they got a situation to work through, and they feel very bad that they can't sit with that family through that most emotional time. But when they call their chaplains, then we're representing them. So it's kind of like a hand in glove kind of situation where we're really representing that department and that officer being there with that family. And they have that trust and confidence that we're going to represent them well. So being there is just one part of it. And then having a purpose, doing something while we're there. Now, I'm going to tell you, you're right. We do a lot of listening. We hear as the person is processing their pain, where they're at, and if they're in good grief or bad grief, healthy or unhealthy, the way they're going to get through this. We want people to get better, not bitter. We want to help people be able to know that this new kind of normal is livable.
That's got to be incredibly tough.
Mm.
And so for you, Chaplain Mindi, during 1 week, let's say last few weeks, I know you have a lot of people to supervise and manage, but did you go out to a number of the scenes yourself?
Luckily, because we have so many, I don't have to go to every one of them. I generally tend to go out to the high profile or where an officer becomes the victim, like in a shooting, or he's been hurt, she's been hurt. So I've been out to several of them, but I'm also out there to make sure my chaplains are okay. I'm a real firm believer in self-care. I think self-care is ethical. I believe that if you are not taking care of yourself, how can you really take care of others? So sometimes I just show up just to say, are you okay? And then when the chaplains reply back, we got this, I don't have to stay. So it's having not only duplicates, but multiples of what we've done and how to train, and every one of them doing it the same consistent way.
We could go on for a long time. I know there's so much for her to talk about, including training people from around the country and setting up protocols, national protocols. But I'm not going to, I'll ask you to come back one day.
I'll come back.
So I've loved this, and thank you. Now, I appreciate it very much, Chaplain Mindi. So I've warned her that I'm going to do a little plug for a book that I recently wrote, and it's called The Wolf at the Door, Undue Influence and Elder Financial Abuse. For anyone that would like a digital copy of the book, just email me at Hackard at Hackard Law, and I'll send you one. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.